The dust storm outside Kalen's workshop raged with unusual ferocity, even by Xylo's standards. Particles of metallic or battered the reinforced windows, adding a rhythmic, almost musical backdrop to the mechanical sounds within. The space mining outpost was known for these storms. Violent, unpredictable, much like its inhabitants. Kalen wiped grime from his forehead, leaving a darker streak across his already soiled face. His calloused hands returned to the intricate stabilizer unit before him, fingers working with surprising gentleness for their size. The workshop, cramped, cluttered, but meticulously organized in its chaos, was his sanctuary, his small corner in a lawless frontier. 3 more calibrations, he muttered to himself, voice rough from disuse. Speaking aloud had become a habit in the 2 years of relative solitude on Xylos. The former soldier preferred it this way. The company of machines, the predictable patterns of circuitry, the honest feedback of mechanical systems. Unlike people, machines didn't lie, betray, or order you to open fire on civilian settlements. Outside his workshop, Xylo Station teamed with the dregs of 17 different species, all drawn to the lucrative but dangerous work of harvesting star dust. Microscopic particles with immense energy potential. The station had once been a legitimate mining operation until the collapse of the Galactic Meridian Corporation 15 years prior. Now it existed in legal limbo, too profitable to abandon, too remote to properly govern. The distinct hiss of the exterior airlock broke Kalen's concentration. He instinctively reached for the modified welding tool that doubled as a makeshift weapon, a habit from his military days he couldn't shake. The airlock cycled open to reveal the massive frame of Zorgith, his scaly orcan skin a mottled blue-gray in the workshop's dim lighting. "Kalen, my favorite human recluse." Zorgith's booming voice filled the small space as he ducked to enter, flanked by 2 silent Vex enforcers. "I bring gifts for the man who saved my life." Kalen returned to his work without looking up. "Didn't save your life. Fixed your atmospheric regulator. That's my job." "Semantics." Zorgith laughed, a grating sound like stones grinding. "When the integrity alarm failed during the last solar flare, your quick work prevented my entire sector from decompression. 6 of my best smuggling routes run through that sector." Kalen remained silent. He had known the repair was for something illegal. Everything on Xylos was, but he maintained his personal code. Fix the technology, ignore its purpose. It kept him alive and relatively unbothered. "You refuse payment beyond the agreed rate. You turn down my offers of protection. You won't even accept premium supply prioritization." Zorgith's massive hand swept through the air in exasperation. A man must accept rewards for exceptional service. It's the way of things. "Not interested." Kalen tightened the final bolt on the stabilizer. "This time I insist." Something in Zorgith's tone made Kalen look up. The Orcan crime boss gestured, and one of his Vex guards stepped forward, pulling something. No, someone from behind them. A slight figure stumbled into view, nearly falling before catching herself. Female, humanoid, but clearly not human, with pale lilac skin that seemed to shimmer faintly even in the workshop's poor lighting. Her delicate features were framed by what resembled hair, but was closer to fine, iridescent filaments that caught the light with each movement. Her eyes, large and almond-shaped, were a deep violet with no visible pupils, currently wide with poorly concealed fear. Around her neck was a thin metal band that pulsed with a soft blue light. Kalen's stomach clenched. A control collar. A slave. A Xenthian. Zorgith announced proudly, as if presenting a rare artifact. One of the few left after their homeworlds. Unfortunate circumstances. Their species is known for unparalleled dexterity and mechanical intuition. She'll be an asset in your work. The Xenthian kept her gaze fixed on the floor, her slender shoulders hunched inward. She was dressed in simple gray coveralls that hung loosely on her frame. Despite her submissive posture, Kalen noticed her hands. Long-fingered, elegant, but bearing the unmistakable calluses of someone familiar with tools and machinery. "Not interested," Kalen repeated, more firmly. Zorgith laughed again. "You misunderstand." This isn't a rental or a loan. She's yours now. Her designation is Lyra, though you can rename her if you prefer. The collar's control unit is key to your biometrics now. He tossed a small device on a Kalen's workbench. All standard functions: obedience enforcement, location tracking, punishment protocols if she tries to flee. Kalen stood slowly, setting down his tools with deliberate care. I don't want to slave, Zorgith. The workshop fell silent save for the distant rumble of the dust storm. The two Vex guards shifted subtly, hands moving closer to their weapons. Slaves, servants, assistants, just terms, Kalen. Zorgith's friendly tone had a new edge. The Xinthians have always served other species. It's their natural place. You humans understand that concept well enough, historically speaking. Kalen felt a familiar coldness settling in his chest, the same detachment that had allowed him to survive 3 campaigns in the Outer Spiral conflict. Take her with you when you leave. The Xinthian, Lyra, flinched almost imperceptibly, though her expression remained carefully blank. I've already registered the transfer. Zorgith's massive shoulders lifted in a shrug. Refusing my gift would be impolitic. Besides, you work too hard alone. Use her for the shop, use her for pleasure, use her for target practice. I don't care. She's property now, your property. Several curious onlookers had gathered at the workshop's entrance, drawn by the presence of Zorgith's enforcers. Kalen could see the mixture of amusement and anticipation on their faces. Entertainment was scarce on Xylos, and confrontations provided rare diversion. I don't use people, Kalen said quietly. A ripple of confused murmurs spread through the small crowd. Zorgith's expression shifted from surprise to something closer to contempt. She's not people, Kalen. She's Xinthian. They're tools with legs. He turned to leave, his enforcers following. At the doorway, he paused. Consider it payment for future services. I'll be back when I need something fixed. The door sealed behind them, leaving Kalen alone with the silent Xinthian. The gathered crowd dispersed slowly, disappointed by the anticlimactic conclusion, but already spreading word of the strange human who didn't know what to do with a perfectly good slave. Kalen looked at Lyra, who hadn't moved or raised her eyes. Then he looked at the control unit on his workbench with distaste. Are you hungry? He asked, his voice awkward in the silence. Lyra's head jerked up in surprise, her violet eyes meeting his for a brief moment before dropping again. I will eat if permitted, she answered, her voice soft but clear, with a melodic quality Kalen hadn't expected. Kalen winced. That's not, he sighed, running a hand through his short, graying hair. Yes, you're permitted. I'm going to heat some ration packs. You can. Sit, if you want. She didn't move. Kalen retreated to the small kitchenette attached to his workshop, feeling the weight of her presence behind him. He had no idea what to do with her. He couldn't send her back to Zorgith. That would be a death sentence or worse. He couldn't free her. The collar ensured that, and without proper documentation, she'd be immediately recaptured by someone likely far crueler than him. He was trapped. They both were. The next morning, Kalen woke to find his workshop tidier than it had been in months. Tools were arranged by size and function, scrap materials sorted into appropriate bins, surfaces wiped clean of grime. Lyra stood in the corner where she had spent the night, her posture perfect despite having slept on a thin emergency blanket on the hard floor. Good morning, Kalen offered uncertainly. Lyra inclined her head. This one has organized your tools as permitted by previous owners. If the arrangement displeases you, this one will restore the previous configuration. It's fine, Kalen said, uncomfortable with her formal speech. You don't have to call yourself this one. Your name is Lyra, right? She nodded once, a quick, efficient movement. I'm Kalen. Yes, Master Kalen. He flinched. Just Kalen is fine. A flicker of confusion crossed her features before returning to careful neutrality. As you wish. Kalen. The day progressed awkwardly. Kalen attempted to work as normal, but Lyra's constant presence, silent, watchful, tense, made it impossible. When customers came with repair jobs, they stared openly at the Xinthian, some with lewd suggestions, others with uncomfortably probing questions about her capabilities. Kalen found himself positioning his body between Lyra and the customers, deflecting questions with grunted monosyllables. By mid-afternoon, he couldn't take it anymore. He set down his tools with a clatter that made Lyra flinch. "Look," he said, turning to face her directly. "I don't know how this works. I don't know what you need. But standing there all day can't be comfortable." Lyra's expression betrayed nothing. "This one, I am conditioned to maintain station for extended periods. That doesn't mean you should have to." Kalen gestured to a stool near his workbench. "Sit, please." She hesitated before perching tentatively on the edge of the stool, her posture still rigid. "Are you actually interested in mechanical work?" he asked. Or was Zorgith just making that up? For the first time, something like genuine emotion flickered across her face, surprise quickly suppressed. "Zenthians were known for technical aptitude. My early training was in systems maintenance before I was reassigned to—" She trailed off. "Before you were reassigned to what?" "Personal service," she said tonelessly. Kalen decided not to press further. "I'm working on a thermal regulator for one of the agricultural pods. The calibration is delicate. Would you like to observe?" The look of naked shock on her face was quickly replaced by careful control, but not before Kalen caught it. "If that is your wish." "It's not about my wishes. Do you want to?" She seemed genuinely puzzled by the question, as if the concept of her own desires was foreign. Finally, she gave a small nod. "Yes," she said simply. Kalen returned to his work, explaining each step as he went. At first, Lyra remained silent, but as the hour progressed, she began to ask hesitant questions, intelligent ones that revealed a deep understanding of thermodynamic principles. By evening, she had moved her stool closer and was handing him tools before he asked for them, anticipating his needs with uncanny accuracy. When a particularly tricky connection finally engaged with a satisfying click, Kalen looked up to see Lyra watching intently, the ghost of a smile on her lips. It vanished instantly when she noticed his gaze. That night, Kalen dragged his spare sleeping pad from storage and set it up in the small alcove off the main workshop. "You'll sleep here," he told her, adding several blankets. "It's not much, but it's better than the floor." Lyra stared at the modest bedding as if it were a luxury suite. "Thank you," she whispered, sounding genuinely moved. Kalen nodded awkwardly. "Get some rest. We have 4 more regulators to calibrate tomorrow." "We?" The word seemed to surprise her as much as it did him. "If you're interested," he added quickly. She nodded, that fleeting almost smile appearing again. "I am interested." As days stretched into weeks, an uneasy routine developed. Kalen would work on repairs while Lyra assisted, her contributions growing more substantial as her confidence gradually increased. She spoke more, though always with careful restraint, as if testing each word before releasing it. The collar remained, a constant reminder of her status. Kalen had examined the control device Zorgith had left, studying its mechanisms without touching the settings. The technology was sophisticated and tamper-proof, designed to administer anything from mild discomfort to lethal shocks if unauthorized removal was attempted. He noticed how Lyra's hand would occasionally drift to the collar when she thought he wasn't looking, her slender fingers tracing its contours with a mixture of resignation and despair. Each time, something twisted painfully in his chest. One evening, after a particularly profitable day of repairs, Kalen returned from the market with extra rations and something wrapped in faded cloth. He placed the small package before Lyra, who looked at it with apprehension. "It's not much," he said gruffly, "but I noticed your coveralls are wearing thin." She unwrapped the package to reveal a simple tunic and pants in deep blue, made from durable synthetic fabric. Her fingers traced the material with wonder. "These are for me. Who else would they be for?" Kalen busied himself with the ration packets, avoiding her gaze. "They should fit. If not, we can trade for different ones." When she emerged from the washroom wearing the new clothes, Kalen was struck by the transformation. The blue fabric complemented her lilac skin, and without the shapeless gray coveralls, he could see that she was gracefully built, her movements fluid and precise. More striking was the way she carried herself, slightly straighter, with marginally more confidence. "Thank you," she said, the words holding more weight than the simple garments warranted. Kalen merely nodded and returned to his meal. He didn't mention how the shopkeeper had leered when Kalen selected women's clothing, or the crude suggestions about dressing up his property. He didn't mention the fight that had nearly broken out when he'd coldly informed the man that Lyra wasn't property, but his assistant. The rumors were spreading across Xylos, the eccentric human mechanic who treated his slave like a person. Some found it amusing, others pathetic, still others dangerous. Kalen ignored them all, but he wasn't naive. Trouble was brewing. It arrived 3 days later in the form of Drell, a human trafficker known for supplying specialized labor to the mining operations on Xylos' northern quadrant. He swaggered into the workshop, eyes immediately fixing on Lyra as she delicately soldered a circuit board. "Heard you acquired some exotic merchandise," Drell said without preamble. "I'm interested in a leasing arrangement. 3-day minimum." Lyra's hands stilled, though her expression remained carefully blank. Kalen didn't look up from the power converter he was dismantling. "Not interested. I'm offering premium rates," Drell persisted. "Xinthians are rare commodities these days. Plenty of collectors who'd pay just to examine one up close. She's not for lease, or sale, or examination." Kalen's voice remained level, but he shifted his stance subtly, angling his body toward the concealed pulse blade beneath his workbench. Drell's false congeniality evaporated. "Don't be difficult, Kalen. Everyone knows you don't appreciate what you've got here. Xinthians are wasted on maintenance work when they have so many specialized talents." Kalen set down his tools and finally looked up, meeting Drell's gaze directly. "Get out. You're making a mistake." Drell's hand moved toward his hip holster. "I can take her off your hands permanently if the leasing arrangement doesn't appeal. Good compensation, too. She's not mine to sell." Kalen's hand closed around the pulse blade's handle. "Last warning. Out." Drell's eyes narrowed. "Zorgith won't like hearing you're refusing good business opportunities, especially when you're squandering a valuable asset. Zorgith can take it up with me directly." After a tense moment, Drell backed toward the door. "This isn't over." When he was gone, Kalen released his grip on the blade, flexing his fingers to ease the tension. He glanced at Lyra, who had resumed her soldering with the same outward calm, though her knuckles were white around the tool. "You okay?" he asked quietly. She nodded without looking up. "Yes. Thank you for intervening. I didn't do anything special." Her violet eyes finally met his. "You did. Most wouldn't." That night, after Lyra had retired to her alcove, Kalen sat at his workbench studying the schematics he'd acquired for standard Meridian Corp control collars. If Lyra's collar followed the same basic design, there might be a way to disable it without triggering the security protocols. It would be dangerous, potentially fatal if he miscalculated, but the alternative was leaving her forever bound. As he worked, Kalen reflected on how quickly Lyra had become essential to his workshop. Her technical skills were exceptional, her eye for detail unmatched. She could spot microfractures in circuitry that he would have missed entirely. More than that, the workshop felt different with her presence, less lonely, more purposeful. He was so absorbed in the schematics that he didn't hear her approach until she spoke. "You're trying to disable it." Her voice was soft but steady. Kalen looked up, startled. Lyra stood in the dim light, her expression unreadable. "Yes," he admitted, seeing no point in denial. "Why?" The question was genuine, tinged with confusion. "Because it's wrong," he said simply. "No one should own another person." She moved closer, studying the schematics over his shoulder. "These are old designs. Mine is newer, with additional safeguards." Kalen frowned. "How do you know?" "I've had 3 different collars, each generation more sophisticated than the last." Her finger traced a circuit path on the diagram. "This trigger mechanism has been replaced by a neural feedback loop in the current models. If you attempt to disrupt it without proper countermeasures, it will interpret the tampering as an escape attempt, destroyed in the war." She had been studying advanced engineering when slave raiders attacked her settlement. She had been property for 7 years. "What will you do?" Kaelin asked one night as they carefully assembled the disruption device. If we succeed, Lyra's hands paused their meticulous work. I don't know, she admitted. Freedom is an abstract concept now, something for memories that don't feel like mine anymore. You could leave Xylos, find somewhere safer, without documentation, without credits. As a Xynthian, she shook her head. I would be recaptured within days. Then what? She looked at him directly, her violet eyes searching his face. I would stay, if permitted. It wouldn't be permission, Kaelin said firmly. It would be your choice. This is your home too, if you want it to be. Something shifted in her expression. Hope, perhaps, or the beginning of it. They were interrupted by the workshop's proximity alarm. Kaelin quickly covered their project with a tarp as the door slid open to reveal Zorgith, flanked not by his usual Vex guards, but by 4 heavily armed enforcers of various species. Kayla, my friend, Zorgith boomed, his massive frame filling the doorway. I've been hearing concerning reports about my gift to you. Kaelin moved subtly to place himself between Zorgith and Lyra. Your gift is none of your concern anymore. All business on Xylos is my concern. Zorgith stepped inside, his enforcers spreading out to flank the workshop's exits. Drell tells me you refused a profitable leasing opportunity. Others say you're calling the Xynthian your assistant. Most troubling of all, his reptilian eyes narrowed. Someone reported seeing you purchase components consistent with collar tampering. Lyra stiffened beside Kaelin. I don't answer to you. Zorgith, Kaelin said evenly. What I do with my property is my business. Ah, Zorgith raised a clawed finger. So you do recognize she's property. That's a start. But you see, I have certain responsibilities to maintain order in our little community. When someone starts treating property as people, it gives others dangerous ideas. Leave, Kaelin said, his hand inching toward the pulse blade concealed at the small of his back. Now, Zorgith sighed theatrically. I had hoped you would be reasonable. He pulled out a small device, different from the control unit he had given Kaelin. This is an override. All collars have them. A failsafe for exactly this sort of situation. He pressed a button, and Lyra gasped, her hands flying to her throat as the collar began to glow brighter. Stop! Kaelin lunged forward, but 2 enforcers intercepted him, restraining his arms. The collar is now in discipline mode, Zorgith explained casually. Not painful yet, just uncomfortable. A reminder of her place. He adjusted a dial, and Lyra fell to her knees, her face contorted with pain she was clearly trying to suppress. I'm reclaiming my property. Kaelin, Zorgith continued. You've proven unfit for ownership, but I'm a reasonable businessman. I'll refund your service credit. Kaelin struggled against the enforcers, his military training surfacing as he calculated angles, weaknesses, possibilities. There were too many of them, all armed, all positioned strategically. Don't, Lyra managed through clenched teeth, looking at Kaelin. Don't risk yourself. Touching, Zorgith mocked. She's concerned for you. That's the problem with Xynthians, too emotional, too attached. It makes them excellent personal servants, but requires firm handling. He increased the setting again, and Lyra collapsed fully to the floor, her body rigid with pain. Something cold and familiar settled over Kaelin. The combat clarity he had known in war. Time seemed to slow as he cataloged every detail. The positions of the enforcers, the distance to his hidden weapons, the path to Lyra, the half-assembled disruption device under the tarp 3 meters away. Last chance, Kaelin, Zorgith warned. Step aside and accept the inevitable, or things get much less pleasant for everyone. Kaelin met Lyra's eyes across the workshop. Something passed between them, understanding, resolve. She gave an almost imperceptible nod. Then her gaze flicked meaningfully toward the workbench where their project lay concealed. Kaelin made his decision. Fine, he said, relaxing his posture. Take her. Zorgith lowered the device slightly, his expression suspicious at the sudden capitulation. Wise choice. The moment the enforcer's grip loosened, Kaelin exploded into motion. He drove an elbow into the throat of one, used the momentum to throw the second into the third, and dove for the workbench. In one fluid movement, He grabbed their improvised disruptor and slid it across the floor toward Lyra. Chaos erupted. Weapons were drawn. Shouts filled the air. Zorgith bellowed orders as his enforcers scrambled to regain control of the situation. Kalen seized a heavy wrench and threw it at the overhead lighting panel, plunging half the workshop into darkness. In the confusion, Lyra, still fighting through the collar's pain, managed to reach the disruptor. With shaking hands, she pressed it against the collar and activated it. The workshop filled with a high-pitched whine. Sparks erupted from the collar as competing electrical systems fought for dominance. Lyra screamed, a sound of agony that tore through Kalen as he fought to reach her side. An enforcer blocked his path. Kalen didn't hesitate, driving his pulse blade into the creature's armored torso, finding the seam he knew existed from years repairing similar protection. The enforcer dropped with a gurgling cry. Zorgith was shouting, the override device clutched in his massive hand, frantically adjusting controls that no longer responded. "What have you done?" he roared. Kalen finally reached Lyra. She was convulsing on the floor, the collar flashing erratically, discharging energy in dangerous bursts. The disruption device wasn't working as they'd planned. Instead of safely deactivating the collar, it had created a feedback loop that was growing more unstable by the second. "Hold on," he urged her, trying to stabilize the device. Just a few more seconds. Lyra couldn't respond, her eyes rolling back as the electrical discharge intensified. The collar was killing her. In desperation, Kalen grabbed the power converter he'd been working on earlier, a crude but powerful tool. With no time for precision, he jammed it against the junction between the collar and the disruptor, creating a third circuit path. The resulting explosion threw him backward. Pain lanced through his side. One of the enforcers had shot him. Through blurred vision, he saw Zorgith advancing, weapon raised. Then came a sound he never expected: cheering. The workshop door had been forced open during the fight, and a crowd had gathered. Not just curious onlookers this time, but neighbors, customers, other residents of Xylos who had watched Kalen's quiet defiance over the weeks. Some held improvised weapons, others actual firearms. They formed a barrier between Zorgith's remaining enforcers and Kalen. "Step back, Zorgith," called Mira, the hydroponic farmer whose life support system Kalen had repaired at cost last month. "This isn't your territory anymore. This station belongs to me." Zorgith snarled. "Parts of it," agreed Torek, a Blasian dock worker whose daughter's medical implant Kalen had modified when the family couldn't afford a replacement. "But not this workshop. Not anymore." Zorgith assessed the crowd, calculating his odds. With 2 enforcers down and the others wounded, even his considerable influence might not be enough against the collective anger of Xylos' working class. "This isn't over," he promised, backing toward the door. "No one defies me on my station." "It's not your station," Kalen managed through the pain in his side. "It never was." After Zorgith and his enforcers retreated, the crowd dispersed slowly, some staying to help with the wounded. Kalen dragged himself to Lyra's motionless form, dread building in his chest. She lay still, the remnants of the collar scattered around her neck, which bore angry burn marks. For a terrible moment, he thought they had failed, that the price of attempting freedom had been her life. Then her chest rose with a shallow breath, followed by another. Kalen gathered her carefully in his arms, mindful of her injuries and his own. "Did it work?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. Kalen touched her neck gently where the collar had been. "Yes," he said, his own voice rough with emotion. "It worked. You're free." A week later, Kalen sat on his worn couch, watching as Lyra meticulously repaired a customer's navigation unit. The burn marks on her neck were healing well, though they would likely leave scars. His own wound was mending slowly. The enforcer's shot had missed vital organs, but left him weakened and in constant discomfort. The workshop had been repaired, though evidence of the confrontation remained in scorch marks on the walls and a cracked floor panel they hadn't yet replaced. Business continued, with a noticeable difference. Customers now addressed Lyra directly, asking for her input, respecting her expertise. None mentioned her status or history. Word had spread quickly through Xylos of the stand against Zorgith. Though the crime boss still controlled much of the station, a silent rebellion had begun. Small acts of defiance, reclaimed territories, whispered plans for greater autonomy. The workshop had become a symbol, though Kaelin had never sought such prominence. "You're staring," Lyra observed without looking up from her work, a small smile playing at her lips. She smiled openly now, no longer hiding her emotions. "Just thinking," Kaelin replied. "Dangerous activity." She set down her tools and turned to face him. "What about? What happens next?" Lyra's expression grew. "Serious. Zorgith won't give up. He can't afford to, not after being challenged publicly." "I know. We could leave," she suggested. "Not for the first time. Find passage on a transport. Try our luck elsewhere." Kaelin considered it. They had discussed the possibility repeatedly over the past week. With Lyra's collar gone, she could theoretically travel, though without official documentation, her options were limited. They had credits saved, not enough for comfortable passage, but perhaps enough for something basic. "Is that what you want?" he asked. Lyra was silent for a long moment. "I don't know," she admitted finally. "For years, all I wanted was freedom and safety. Now I have one, but not the other." She gestured around the workshop. "But this place, it's become something I never expected." "What's that?" "Home," she said simply. The word resonated between them, heavy with meaning. Kaelin understood perfectly. Despite its dangers and discomforts, Xylos had become home to him too. Specifically this workshop, and now, unexpectedly, the presence of the woman before him. "Then we stay," he decided. "At least for now. See what happens." Lyra nodded, relief evident in her expression. "We'll need better security. Already working on it." Kaelin indicated the components spread across his workbench. Reinforced door, motion sensors, emergency protocols. "And allies," Lyra added, "like those who came to our aid. They're not all reliable," Kaelin cautioned. "Most acted on impulse, not commitment. Then we give them reasons to commit." Lyra's eyes shone with new purpose. "We help them, as you helped me. We show them what's possible." Kaelin raised an eyebrow. "Sounds dangerously close to starting a movement." "Not a movement," Lyra corrected. "A community, a family." The word hung between them, unexpected but right. Kaelin had been alone for so long. By choice, by circumstance, by the weight of his past. The idea of family had seemed permanently beyond his reach. Yet here it was, offered by someone who had even less reason to trust in such concepts. Someone who, despite everything that had been taken from her, still believed in connection and belonging. "A family," he repeated, testing the word. "I like that." 3 months later, the workshop had transformed. New equipment lined the walls, the lighting had been upgraded, and a proper living area had been constructed in what was once storage space. Business thrived, with customers coming not just from Xylos, but from passing ships, drawn by the growing reputation of the expert repair team. Lyra had flourished in freedom. She moved with confidence now, her technical brilliance on full display as she tackled increasingly complex projects. She had begun incorporating Xynthian design elements into their work, elegant, efficient modifications that elevated simple repairs to minor works of art. Most striking was the change in her demeanor. She laughed, she argued, she expressed opinions freely. She was, in every meaningful way, herself. Zorgith had not returned, though his influence still loomed over the station. His enforcers gave the workshop a wide berth, but occasionally lingered at a distance, watching. Kaelin and Lyra maintained their vigilance, never leaving the workshop unattended, always carrying some form of protection when venturing into the station. The workshop had also become something of a gathering place. People came not just for repairs, but for advice, for quiet conversation, for momentary refuge. A Trellin dock worker with a bruised face. A human girl escaping an abusive guardian. A former soldier with trembling hands and haunted eyes, much like Kaelin had once been. They came, they stayed a while, they left stronger. "You've created a sanctuary," observed Mira one afternoon as she delivered a fresh batch of hydroponically grown vegetables. payment for Kalen's latest modifications to her irrigation system. Kalen, looking up from a particularly stubborn power coupling, frowned. It's just a workshop. Mira smiled knowingly. Is it? Before he could respond, the door slid open to admit a small group. 3 nervous-looking aliens of different species, led by Torek. Each wore some form of restraint. A collar, a bracelet, a neural implant visible at the temple. Kalen tensed immediately, eyes darting to Lyra, who had already moved to secure the door behind them. They need help, Torek said without preamble. Like she did. He nodded toward Lyra. This isn't a rescue operation, Kalen said, though without much conviction. It wasn't the first time someone had brought slaves to them, hoping for the same miracle that had freed Lyra. We can pay, said one of the slaves hesitantly, a slender Avalonian with luminescent markings along his arms. Not much, but it's not about payment, Kalen interrupted, setting down his tools with a sigh. It's about risk. Each collar is different. The disruption technique we used nearly killed Lyra. We know the risk, the Avalonian replied, his voice steadier now. Any chance is better than certainty. Lyra stepped forward, her gaze moving deliberately from the Avalonian to his companions. A reptilian Sassic female and a species Kalen didn't recognize, humanoid, but with distinctive cranial ridges. What are your names? She asked gently. The question seemed to surprise them, as if they had expected technical assessment before personal acknowledgement. Darvin, the Avalonian answered. Eshka, said the Sassic. Nevin, the third alien offered after a moment's hesitation. Lyra nodded, as if confirming something to herself. Removing the collars is only the beginning, she told them. Freedom requires somewhere to go, something to do, someone to be. Are you prepared for that? The 3 exchanged glances. It was Eshka who answered, her sibilant voice determined despite her obvious fear. We've been preparing our whole lives, even if we didn't know it. Kalen recognized the resolution in their eyes, the same quiet defiance he had seen in Lyra's violet gaze that first day, buried beneath layers of forced submission but never extinguished. We'll help, he said before he could reconsider. But I make no promises about success. Relief washed over their faces, followed quickly by apprehension. They understood the danger better than most. Over the next few days, Kalen and Lyra worked tirelessly, analyzing each restraint device, developing customized countermeasures. The work was painstaking, requiring countless micro-adjustments and test simulations. They slept in shifts, one always keeping watch. Word had somehow spread. More came seeking help, at first 1 or 2, then small groups, all wearing the visible signs of ownership. Some they could assist immediately. Others required components they didn't have, careful planning they couldn't rush. This can't continue, Kalen told Lyra late one night as they recalibrated a disruptor for a particularly complex neural implant. Zorgith will notice. He probably already has. I know, Lyra acknowledged, her fingers making minute adjustments to the device. But how can we turn them away? Kalen had no answer. Each face reminded him of Lyra on that first day, afraid but hoping, resigned but resilient. Each successful removal strengthened his resolve, despite the growing danger. It was on the 6th day that Torek burst into the workshop, his usually stoic features tight with alarm. Enforcers, he warned breathlessly. Not just Zorgithis. Colonial Authority. Someone informed. Colonial Authority. The nominal government presence on Xylos, corrupt and ineffective but armed with official sanction. They rarely interfered with Zorgith's operations, preferring to collect their bribes and maintain the fiction of order without the inconvenience of actual enforcement. That they were moving now meant something significant had changed. How many? Kalen demanded, already activating the workshop's rudimentary security systems. 2 squads, heavily armed, moving sector by sector. Lyra was already in motion, alerting the 4 slaves currently sheltered in the workshop's hidden alcove. How long? Minutes. No more. Kalen accessed the hidden compartment beneath his workbench, retrieving the weapons he had hoped never to use again. Military grade, officially prohibited, meticulously maintained. The weight of the pulse rifle in his hands brought unwelcome memories, but his hands remembered their purpose. Evacuation route? He asked Torek. Service tunnels are being watched. They're thorough this time. Lyra returned with their guests, fear evident on their faces but standing straight, awaiting direction. We fight, suggested one, a creel whose manacles they had removed just hours earlier. No, Kalen decided instantly. Too many innocents in a crossfire. Too many of you still wearing restraints that could be remotely activated. Then we surrender, said another, resignation in her voice. Also no. Kalen checked his rifle's charge. You get out through the emergency hatch. Maintenance shaft leads directly to docking bay 7. Mira has a transport ready. Unofficial evacuation plan we developed weeks ago. Lyra will guide you. And you? Lyra asked, though her expression said she already knew the answer. I'll delay them. No. Her voice was firm. Not alone. There's no time to argue. I'm not arguing. Lyra stepped closer, taking the smaller pulse pistol from the compartment. I'm stating fact. Not alone. Kalen wanted to protest, to insist she save herself, but the determined set of her jaw told him it would be futile. This was her choice, freely made, uncoerced, irrevocable. Torek, he said instead, get them to the transport. You know the route. Torek nodded grimly, then hesitated. What about after? Rendezvous point. A good question. If they survived the coming confrontation, the workshop would no longer be safe. Everything they'd built would be forfeit. Secondary location. Lyra answered before Kalen could. Outer Ring, abandoned processing center. We cached supplies last month. Kalen looked at her in surprise. She shrugged slightly. Contingency planning. You taught me to be prepared. A faint smile touched his lips despite the dire circumstances. She had learned well. After the others departed through the hidden exit, Kalen and Lyra positioned themselves strategically. He near the main entrance, she covering the secondary access point. They worked silently, efficiently, like a unit that had trained together for years rather than months. This isn't what I wanted for you, Kalen said finally, checking the barricades one last time. Freedom was supposed to mean safety. Freedom means choice, Lyra corrected, her voice steady despite the encroaching danger. This is my choice. To stand with you. To protect what we've built. What we become. Before Kalen could respond, the proximity alerts flashed red. Multiple armed figures approaching from both entrances. The enforcers had arrived. Colonial authority, boomed an amplified voice outside. Open immediately for inspection. Kalen exchanged a glance with Lyra. Standard procedure would be to comply, appear cooperative, then create a diversion at the optimal moment. A hint of a smile played across her lips. And when have we ever followed standard procedure? Despite everything, Kalen found himself smiling back. Almost never. Exactly. Lyra adjusted her grip on her weapon. So what's the plan? We talk, Kalen decided. Stall for time. Every minute we give Torek and the others increases their chances. And if talking fails, then we improvise. He activated the door intercom. This is a private business. State your purpose. Inspection by colonial authority order, came the immediate reply. Open the door, or we will force entry. Inspection for what purpose? Kalen countered, watching the security feed as more enforcers moved into position outside. Suspected illegal modification of registered property and violation of ownership regulations. Kalen's jaw tightened. There are no slaves here. Only free individuals. A new voice responded, smoother, more cultivated but no less threatening. Freedom is a legal status, Mr. Kalen, not a philosophical position. Open the door or face severe consequences. Lyra moved closer, keeping her voice low. That's Administrator Tellus. Zorgatha's primary contact in the authority. If he's here personally, then this is serious, Kalen finished. They're not just looking to shut us down. They're making an example. The door shuddered as something heavy impacted it. The first attempt at forced entry. The reinforcements would hold temporarily, but not indefinitely. Final warning, announced Tellus. Surrender now, and your sentence will be imprisonment rather than execution. Continue resistance, and His voice was drowned out by a sudden, deafening explosion from the far side of the station. The security feed showed enforcers turning, weapons raised, responding to an unexpected threat. What the? Kalen stared at the monitor in confusion. A second explosion rocked the station, closer this time, followed by alarm klaxons and emergency lighting. The enforcers outside were no longer focused on the workshop door, their attention diverted to the growing chaos. Kalen's communicator crackled to life. "Package delivered," came Myra's triumphant voice. "Diversion in progress. Secondary route clear for approximately 3 minutes." They created a diversion for us, Lyra realized, already moving toward the emergency exit. "We need to go. Now." Kalen hesitated only briefly before following. The workshop, his home for years, their sanctuary for months, would be lost. Everything they couldn't carry would be forfeit. But the alternative was capture or death, and neither was acceptable. Now when they had finally found something worth surviving for, they slipped out through the secondary exit, carrying only essential tools and weapons. The corridors beyond were in chaos, emergency systems activating, station residents either rushing toward the explosions to salvage what they could or fleeing from potential danger. No one paid attention to two more figures moving urgently through the confusion. They had nearly reached the rendezvous point when Kalen's instincts flared. He pulled Lyra into a recessed doorway just as a squad of enforcers rounded the corner ahead, led by a massive figure Kalen recognized immediately. Zorgith. The Orcan crime boss was in full battle gear, his scaly hide enhanced by armored plates, his massive hands wrapped around a weapon that could shred the corridor's metal walls. His reptilian face was set in a snarl of frustrated rage as he barked orders at his enforcers. "Find them," he roared. "They do not leave this station alive." Lyra's hand found Kalen's in the shadows, her fingers intertwining with his. Her touch was steady, fearless. "Different route?" she whispered. Kalen surveyed their options. The main passages would be watched. The maintenance tunnels were too exposed. But there was another way, dangerous, rarely used except in true emergencies. "External traverse," he murmured. "Maintenance hatches along the station's outer hull. We'll need EVA gear." Lyra nodded, understanding immediately. "Supply closet, section 47. Should have emergency suits." They moved carefully, avoiding major corridors, using service passages and ventilation shafts where possible. The station's design, haphazard and jury-rigged, worked in their favor, offering countless hidden routes between sectors. Section 47 supply closet was undisturbed, its emergency equipment intact. They donned EVA suits quickly, checking each other's seals with practiced efficiency. "Ready?" Kalen asked as they stood before the airlock. Lyra adjusted her helmet one final time, her violet eyes meeting his through the faceplate. "With you?" "Always." The external traverse was harrowing, magnetic boots providing tenuous purchase on the station's battered hull, tether lines offering minimal security as they navigated around sensor arrays and damaged plating. The vastness of space surrounded them, distant stars cold and indifferent to their struggle. They had traveled nearly half the distance to the rendezvous point when movement caught Kalen's eye. A maintenance hatch ahead, cycling open. He signaled Lyra to stop, both of them pressing flat against the hull as a suited figure emerged. Not an enforcer, Kalen realized with relief as the figure turned. The slight build and familiar movements belonged to Torek. Cautiously, they approached. Torek's posture relaxed as he recognized them, gesturing urgently toward the open hatch. Inside the airlock, they removed their helmets once pressure was restored. "Thought you might take the scenic route," Torek said by way of greeting. "Others are already aboard. Transport leaves in 10 minutes, with or without us." "Status of the diversions?" Kalen asked as they shed the bulky EVA suits. "Effective but temporary. Zorgith has squads at every official exit. Colonial Authority has locked down all registered transport." "And our transport?" Lyra asked. A rare smile crossed Torek's weathered face. "Unregistered. Myra's brother runs salvage operations in the outer belt. No questions, no records. They moved quickly through deserted corridors to a small, dimly lit docking port. The ship waiting, there was a battered cargo hauler, designed for asteroid mining and scrap collection. Its hull was patched in dozens of places, its designation marks deliberately obscured. At the boarding ramp stood Mira, a compact pulse rifle held competently in her steady hands. "About time," she called. "We're on a schedule here." Inside, the cargo hold had been converted to passenger space, with makeshift seating and storage secured to the walls. The former slaves they had helped were there, along with at least a dozen others, a mixture of species and ages, all bearing the signs of recent captivity. "You've been busy," Kalen observed, turning to Mira. She shrugged. "You started something. It grew." "Where are we going?" Lyra asked, helping a young Trellan child secure her safety harness. "Outer colonies," Mira replied. "Beyond Meridian jurisdiction. My brother knows places where questions aren't asked and skills are valued more than documentation." The ship shuddered as its engines engaged. Through the small viewport, Kalen watched as Xylo's station began to recede. The place that had been his refuge and prison for years, now permanently closed to him. "Will they follow?" Lyra asked quietly, coming to stand beside him. "Zorgith will want to," Kalen answered honestly. "But the Colonial Authority won't authorize pursuit beyond their jurisdiction, not for what they'll classify as a minor insurrection on a peripheral station. And the others? Those we couldn't help." It was the question that had been weighing on him as well. They had freed some, but for every collar they had removed, dozens more remained locked in place throughout the station. "We'll find a way back," he promised. "Not immediately, but we'll return with better resources, better plans." Lyra's hand found his, warm and certain. "We'll build something first," she said. "A foundation. A home. Then we'll help others build theirs." The engines shifted to full power, pressing them gently back as the ship accelerated away from the station. Through the viewport, Xylos diminished to a bright point among countless others, indistinguishable from the stars beyond. Kalen looked around the cargo hold at the faces of those they had helped free, exhausted but hopeful, uncertain but determined. They were not soldiers or revolutionaries. They were simply people seeking the chance to live on their own terms, to make their own choices. A family, forged not by blood, but by shared purpose. By mutual respect. By the simple recognition of each other's intrinsic worth. "I never thought I'd have this again," Kalen admitted softly, his voice for Lyra alone. "People to care about. People who care back." "Neither did I," she replied, leaning slightly against his shoulder. "For years, I didn't dare hope for anything beyond surviving one more day. And now," Lyra smiled, the full, unguarded expression that still caught him by surprise every time. "Now I plan for decades. For a workshop twice as large as the old one. For technologies we haven't even imagined yet. For a community where no one wears a collar, where no one stands above or below another." "Ambitious," Kalen noted, though there was no criticism in his tone. "Yes," she agreed simply. "That's what freedom is for." As the ship entered hyperspace, leaving Xylos and its troubles light years behind, Kalen found himself believing in her vision. It wouldn't be easy. Nothing worthwhile ever was. There would be struggles ahead, setbacks, perhaps even failures. But they would face them together, not as master and slave, not as rescuer and rescued, but as equals, as partners, as family. In a universe that had taken everything from both of them, they had found something precious and improbable, a home in each other. And in the community, they were building one person at a time. Kalen looked at Lyra, at the determined set of her jaw and the hope in her violet eyes, and knew with absolute certainty that he would never be alone again. And in that knowledge was a freedom more profound than the mere absence of chains, a freedom to belong, to care, to build something that would outlast them both. A freedom worth any risk to protect.